Hey, awesome fans, me Megashark, and today I'm reacting to uh Dr. Bob's series. This one is SCP 478, The Tooth Fairies. So let's get to it.
The dentist is clocking out after an especially long day. A
Yeah.
root canal, a wisdom tooth extraction, too many cavities to count. When
Oh
her cell
yeah.
phone rings, she answers and is surprised to hear the panicked voice of her wife on the other line. Her heart
Oh
stops
dear.
for a
Oh
moment as she
no.
imagines the worst: a car accident, a house fire. But after listening for a moment, she's able to gather enough context to relax. Their son lost his first tooth today. There was a bit of blood on his face, which had sent her wife into a bit of a state. But now, as they both realize it was nothing more than a standard rite of passage, the moment of terror is over. When the dentist arrives home, she finds her wife and son sitting at the kitchen table with dinner ready, and her wife is in the middle of a story. She's telling their son, who listens wide-eyed and rapt, all about the magical creature known as the Tooth Fairy. Later that night, after they've read the boy a story and put him to bed, the two mothers remind him to put his freshly lost tooth under his pillow. When he wakes up, they promise the Tooth Fairy will have left him a surprise. They wait for him to fall asleep, and then, when they hear his gentle snoring, it's time for the swap. The mother who works with teeth all day opts to do the honors. It only seems fair. She sneaks into the room, careful not to wake the boy, and lifts the edge of his pillow. Hang on. What happened to the tooth? She can't see it anywhere. She lifts the pillow just a bit more, but she can't find it.
Where did the tooth
What she sees instead is a fluttering motion as something small and winged darts
out.
What
on earth is that?
She covers her mouth to stifle a startled scream. It's just a moth, she realizes, as the little winged shape darts around the darkened room. Nothing to worry about.
That doesn't look like a moth.
Probably got lost in the sheets. Nothing to worry about.
Moth don't.
She slips a quarter under the pillow and sneaks back out of the room. She doesn't stay long enough to see the little winged creature, the thing she thinks is a moth, fly toward her son's face, landing in his open mouth. The next morning, the boy is delighted to find a shiny quarter under his pillow. He is less delighted to find that he has come down with a sudden case of the sniffles and sneezes.
Oh no.
As the dentist heads off for another day of work, her wife calls out from her own job, opting to keep the boy home from school today, just in case. Meanwhile, the dentist is hard at work once more. Today is a bit less stressful than yesterday, but not by a wide margin. Her first patient of the day refuses to sit still while she checks for cavities, nearly kicking her in the process.
After they leave,
she takes a moment in the back with a cup of coffee, centering herself. When she walks back into the waiting room, she sees her wife sitting there with their son. What are they doing here? She asks her wife, and sees tears in her eyes as she struggles to answer. She turns to their son and asks him what's wrong. He doesn't say a word. Instead, he just opens his mouth. The tooth he lost. Oh my goodness! But that's not all. His mouth is full of teeth. Oh no! There are teeth all across the roof of his mouth, the insides of his cheeks, covering his tongue. The dentist suspects that if she shone a light down his throat, she would see teeth all the way down. Oh my gosh! Because this is no job for an ordinary dental practitioner. No, he needs to go to the hospital. Never have been prepared for her son to come down with a case of SCP-478. SCP-478 is a species of small entities of varying size and shape, which resemble a darkly colored butterfly or moth when in flight.
That doesn't look like a butterfly or moth, obviously.
To capture. Instances of SCP-478 that have been contained do not appear to have a need for food, sleep, air, or reproduction. There is still little known about the nature and motives of SCP-478, but this much is clear. They are predatory in nature and tend to target humans under the age of 25, especially those who have not yet lost all of their deciduous teeth. When an instance of SCP-478 finds its prey, it will enter the victim's mouth while they sleep and attach itself to the soft palate in the upper nasal cavity, blocking one of the nostrils. After the creature has embedded there, the victim's body will begin to produce an excess of mucus. With the stuffy nose and increased mucus production, the victim will wake to believe they have come down with a cold. A bit of an annoyance, sure, but nothing some rest, lots of fluids, and a bit of grandma's chicken soup recipe can't cure. That would be true if it were, in fact, a cold.
Yeah.
But as the condition progresses, the victim soon realizes that they have come down with more than a case of the sniffles. Soon after waking up, the victim's palate will begin to generate teeth at a rate far faster than ordinary tooth growth. The more teeth grow in, the faster they grow, and the more quickly they spread. These teeth will continue to sprout from the palate, more and more teeth emerging through the skin, until the entire palate has been covered. But it doesn't stop there.
What?
It continues down the victim's throat and into the esophagus. Over the next
That's
several
bad.
days, usually between 2 and 4, the growth of teeth will continue down into the stomach lining, filling the stomach. Then, teeth will begin to grow in the lungs, making it difficult to breathe. Then will grow from the subcutaneous layer of skin. The law of conservation of matter comes into play as these teeth sprout. The calcium required to produce them can't just come from thin air. It must come from somewhere in the body. In this case, that would be the skeleton. The skeletal calcium is leached away to provide new teeth with the material they require. As you might imagine, this process is extremely painful. And downright unpleasant in every way. Now, there's no polite way to put this. The ultimate stage of the infestation involves teeth growing downward through the digestive tract. The growth stops once the entire digestive tract has been filled with teeth. Then, the SCP-478 instance will fly out through the victim's mouth, leaving the tooth-filled victim behind. These teeth are, aside from their placement, ordinary. They contain a root, nerve, enamel, just like any tooth you might find in a mouth. You know, where teeth are ordinarily found. The parts of the body where the teeth have formed may expose them to unusual conditions, such as the high concentration of acid in the stomach. Teeth that form within the skin, on the other hand, group together and form large, hard masses of dental material beneath the surface of the skin. The method by which SCP-478 induces this heightened growth of dental tissue is currently a mystery. At first, Foundation research into the nature of the anomalous beings resulted in few leads. But then, one potential lead emerged in an unlikely place. In order to understand the nature of this lead, then I must first take us back in time to the year 1956. Dr. Razman Yelkov was issued a task by his comrade, Dr. Grigori.
What did they found?
Grigori asked Yelkov to develop a method that would allow him to produce perfect specimens of human teeth. New, authentic specimens not taken from a cadaver or made from an alternative material. It seemed like an impossible task, until a fellow doctor told him stories of an unnamed man who had found something impossible.
Oh, no.
Tooth fairies. Dr. Yelkov's colleague brought him to the man with no name, who told him all about these fairies. While traveling during the war in search of remedies, the man said that he met and captured a fairy called Isabella. This Isabella taught the unnamed doctor the fairy language and appointed herself his assistant. From there, Isabella taught the unnamed doctor about the methodology of the fairies, how they could draw enamel from human bones, and how they used that enamel as a source of nutrients to sustain themselves. Naturally, Dr. Yelkov had his doubts about the strange man's claims. He asked for proof, as any of us might in the face of fairy tales, and the doctor with no name was happy to provide it. He took Dr. Yelkov to his workshop, and upon stepping through the door, the doctor was met with a sight of at least 50 fairies fluttering around the room, their dark, iridescent wings beating as they flitted to and fro. This was it, the secret key he had been looking for, the way to unlock the seemingly impossible task he had been issued.
Goodness.
The man offered Dr. Yelkov a room for the night, and he accepted, with the intent of learning more about the secrets of the fairies
you're gonna end up dead.
But the events of the evening did not go according to plan. When Dr. Yelkov offered to purchase some of the fairies from the man in order to use them for his own research, the offer was refused. Dr. Yelkov, ever the ruthless pragmatist, drew his weapon and fired one single shot.
Oh my goodness!
Heart. With no one left to stop him, he grabbed a large jar and began to capture the fairies. He managed to catch 30 of them in total before setting off on the journey back to his own laboratory. Once Dr. Yelkov was back in his laboratory, he examined the fairies more thoroughly. They looked like ordinary butterflies at first glance, but a closer look revealed humanoid characteristics: arms, hands, legs, and faces. While inspecting and performing autopsies on several of the creatures, Dr. Yelkov determined that the specimens contained unidentified chemicals which react with the oral environment. He isolated these chemicals for further study. Now, the real work could begin. Dr. Yelkov analyzed the way in which the fairy's
Oh my
physiology interacted with
goodness.
sodium monofluorophosphate and hexafluorosilicic acid, and in doing so, was able to reproduce the effects a fairy might have on a human body, recreating it on a common fungus. This was not enough for a finished product, however, as the fungus had no source of calcium that would allow for the formulation of human teeth.
Sorry, my
He would have
leg.
to test his new research on human subjects in order to truly gauge its effectiveness. For his first test subject, he selected an 8-year-old child from a camp in Moscow.
Poor kid!
She was injected with 20 milliliters of the serum he had managed to develop and observed for 10 days without any notable changes. Then, on the 11th day of the trial, the patient was short of breath and complaining of abdominal pain. An X-ray showed a large mass beneath her left lung. 2 days later, the patient was dead, and Dr. Yelkov extracted a large mass of calcium from her lower left abdomen. The cause of death was massive internal bleeding caused by this very mass. Over the course of several more human trials, Dr. Yelkov fine-tuned his serum. It was producing
he's a
calcified masses in the
murderer.
bodies of the subjects, sure, but Dr. Grigori was expecting teeth. He was getting closer, though. By trial 4, he had managed to create teeth, though they were undeveloped and had not fully grown to the proper size and shape. But it was progress, grim and gruesome as the process was. By trial 19, he had cracked it. The test subject was the teenage daughter of an American businessman named Kyle Schrader, a man so greedy and craven, he had sold his own child for medical testing, all for a hefty chunk of change, $2.6 million, courtesy of Dr. Yelkov's patron, Dr. Grigori. This trial was, frankly, horrific to read. I've pored over some disturbing scientific documents in my time, but never something that distressed me quite so much as the tale of a teenage girl sold by her father, made a lab rat by a mad doctor, treated without anesthesia, and lobotomized when she complained. But Dr. Yelkov did not see it as a horror. He was simply elated that his labor had yielded that most calcium-rich of fruits.
I feel sorry for the kids.
He packaged the extracted tooth specimens and sent them to Dr. Grigori for approval, along with 7 other dental practitioners. Now, I am not one to express a belief in karma, per se, and Dr. Grigori's exact fate is unconfirmed to this day, but I can believe we can extrapolate what became of him based on what the Foundation learned about Dr. Yelkov's work. And if my guess is correct,
his own
then I believe Dr. Grigori got exactly what was coming to him. When SCP Foundation agents raided Dr. Yelkov's laboratory, they discovered a series of phenomena that were later designated SCP-1994. These, as we can now surmise, were the results of Dr. Yelkov's research with SCP-478. SCP-1994-1 is a serum, the chemical makeup of which has been rather difficult to pin down. Some samples of the serum have had higher levels of sodium monofluorophosphate, while others have had higher levels of hexafluorosilicic acid. Either way, application of this serum stimulates the growth of both maxillary and mandibular tooth structures, all outside of their usual environment of the human mouth. These resulting structures are classified SCP-1994-2, and though they appear identical to human teeth at first glance, they lack the basic structures of teeth. For example, they have no dentin layer or pulp tissue. They are simply solid pieces of dental enamel and are highly vulnerable to decay. As these enamel pieces decay, they release a white powder that is capable of infecting those who inhale it with a version of SCP-478's effects. Individuals infected with SCP-1994-2 powder, or who have been administered a dose of SCP-1994-1 serum, are termed SCP-1994-3. Once exposed, the infection progresses through 5 stages. First, there is initial exposure, after which the subject has no visible signs of infection for up to 2 weeks. Notably, this infection works far less quickly than a direct infestation of SCP-478. During this 2-week period, calcium deposits will begin to develop throughout the person's body, as cell structures ordinarily used for immune system response will reorient to become capable of gathering the components for producing enamel. After the 2-week period is up, and these calcium deposits have been effectively cooking under the skin the entire time, the subject will begin to develop cysts all over their skin, beginning on the limbs before progressing to the head, neck, back, and groin. These cysts are painful to the touch, and the subject will be compelled to resist any attempts to remove them in spite of the pain and discomfort. As the cysts grow and spread, they will rupture the skin and slowly decrease the metabolic functions of the subject. At a
Ouch,
point
ouch,
approximately 5
ouch.
weeks after initial exposure, the cysts will burst open, revealing the mature, adult human tooth that has been growing beneath the surface. Once the tooth has emerged, it cannot be removed from the skin tissue except via surgery. Once the subject has reached this stage, the breakouts of teeth will occur faster and faster, spreading until they have covered all of the extremities,
Oh
and then will begin to manifest in the soft tissues of the palate, the inner ear, and ocular tissues, spreading to every orifice. This stage of the infection resembles an infestation of SCP-478, though the teeth are lacking the interior nerve and pulp present in those created by SCP-478. Though the teeth may be removed through surgery, as I mentioned, the surgery is only a temporary fix.
Does
After
it
any
grow?
teeth are removed from the
Oh
body,
my goodness,
new
it
growths will
grows
form in
back.
their place.
Oh.
After 8 weeks following initial
Oh
infection, the entire
my
body of the subject will be covered in a layer of teeth, or SCP-1994-2. But then, it all gets even worse. The teeth will begin to develop carious lesions across all of their surfaces. It is unknown how these teeth decay, given the fact that they are not exposed to any acid-producing oral bacteria. But they do decay just the same, and the process is highly unpleasant. Over the course of no more than 7 days, all the thousands of teeth across the subject's body begin to show signs of gross decay and release that aforementioned infectious white powder. This is possibly due to the use of fungus in the serum's development phase, as this white powder is somewhat reminiscent of fungal
the
spores.
mushroom.
After the subject's body is covered in fully rotten teeth, they will perish in the ultimate stage of infection. The cause of death is due to the combination of weakened immune system, exposure to massive amounts of decay, and the inability to eat anything or receive nutrition intravenously. No subjects have lived longer than 2 weeks past full decay. SCP-1994 was discovered during a raid conducted by the Foundation in collaboration with GRU Division P operatives in the former USSR in 1959. When they raided the laboratory, the Foundation discovered 9 instances of SCP-1994-3. 7 had already died, and 2 were decaying. Dr. Yelkov was nowhere to be found, but the Foundation did recover his notes and journals. The fairies he spoke of in his notes were also nowhere to be found, and the Foundation was unable to confirm their existence for several years. But then, they discovered an instance of SCP-478 in the wild. Dr. Yelkov really had encountered these creatures, captured them, studied them. Any instances of SCP-478 that are found are to be surgically removed from their victims before death and kept in one piece. After they have been recovered, they must be kept in specialized vacuum-sealed lockers in Biosite 66. As instances of SCP-478 do not appear to be able to pass through solid matter, they may be held indefinitely, as long as no damage occurs. Victims who have only been mildly affected by SCP-478 may be given ordinary treatment in a civilian medical establishment, though Foundation surgeons must perform the procedure under the guise of orthodontic surgery.
I thought it was surgery that they need to.
Victims who have been severely affected by SCP-478 must be taken to Biosite 16 for study. Because of the unique way in which SCP-478 works, infected individuals must not be terminated prematurely. Victims who have been deemed capable of a full recovery are to be treated for infection and released from Foundation custody. After recovering, they must be given a Class B amnestic, and false memories must be planted to avoid arousing any suspicion. Though the process of infection that SCP-1994-3 instances go through shares some symptoms with an SCP-478 infestation, many of the symptoms differ dramatically. This in particular interests me. It would seem that the chemical components produced by SCP-478 are not the only factor in their effects on the human body. Something else must be responsible, something that requires the physical presence of one of these so-called fairies, rather than just the compounds they secrete or the chemical reactions they cause. Though I disagree deeply with his methodology, I can see why Dr. Yelkov was so compelled to study these creatures. If the Foundation is ever able to track down Dr. Yelkov, provided he is still alive, they may be able to discover more about these tooth fairies. If Dr. Yelkov had left the other nameless researcher alive, he might have learned even more about them. How to communicate with them, for example. If that other man's story is to be believed, these beings are sentient. They have names, their own language, and are capable of intelligent communication. Maybe, with some further study and some cooperative living specimens, the Foundation could learn the secrets of the fairy language just as the other doctor did. Imagine the possibilities if we could speak to these creatures. Perhaps they could
It
ask
would be
them why it is they
wonderful.
do what they do to us. Perhaps they could broker some sort of peace between the species. Perhaps, and this might be naively optimistic of me,
Yeah.
they could ask them to stop. In the meantime, if you find a quarter under your pillow, make sure to check the inside of your mouth. You might just find an uninvited guest. Check out the Dr. Bob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of Dr. Bob, like SCP-2450, Teeth.
'Cause you never know what's gonna happen.
Another day,
Yeah.
another disastrous pitch meeting.
Yeah.
The animator lets out a heavy sigh as he unlocks the door to his house, all but tossing his bag to the ground when he enters the living room. He takes off his coat and leaves it where it fell, kicks off his shoes, and doesn't stop moving until he enters his bedroom. With all of the frustrated energy he has accumulated throughout this extremely tiresome day, he throws himself onto
I
his
could
bed with a
feel
groan.
you.
He grabs
That's
the
always
closest
so
pillow, shoves his face into it,
tiresome.
and lets out a long, loud scream of disappointment. The day started off promising enough, with a meeting he was lucky to get. But as soon as the producers started checking his phone 5 minutes in, he knew the whole pursuit was doomed.
Yeah.
He prepped meticulously. Concept art, a binder full of episode pitches, and a flashy presentation to really showcase the, well, show. But after all that work, the producer, who barely gave him a single look the entire time, said that no one is looking to buy original shows right now.
What?
Remakes and existing
Why?
intellectual property are really what the market is suited for at the moment. So he
I
was
think
sent back
it's
home with nothing
awesome.
but wounded pride and wasted time to show for all that hard work. If it was
The
the only
poor
one
guy.
this month, he might not feel so despondent. But the fact is, this was only the latest in a long series of letdowns. Even with previous successes under his belt and a stint on a successful show, no one is buying what he's selling.
Poor
So
guy.
what now? What's next? Tear the whole thing up and start over again? Order a pizza and stay in bed all weekend? Maybe he should go for a walk and clear his head. No, none of that sounds quite right. There's only one thing to do when his mood gets this bad. Sit down at the drafting table and get back to drawing. It's the only way to clear his head, leave it all on the page, and get a clean start tomorrow.
Yeah.
Whatever else happens,
guess
he's always
so.
got his art, even if no one's buying it right now. He drags himself out of bed, orders that pizza for later, and slumps into his seat, waiting for inspiration to strike. He caps and uncaps his pen over and over again, but
He's
nothing
thinking.
comes to mind.
He's thinking.
With a heavy sigh, he draws a circle. That's something at least. Could be a head, maybe. He adds a line stretching down to form a body. 2 more strokes of the pen to make arms, and 2 longer strokes to make a pair of legs. There, a little faceless stick man. He scribbles a quick pair of eyes, but stops short of a mouth. He feels so voiceless right now, shouting into an industry determined to keep its ears plugged. Maybe this little stick figure is like him in that way. If the stick figure is him, then it's probably just as plagued with doubts as he is. So why not draw those doubts too?
Oh
He grabs a black pen,
no.
scribbling
So
in
when he
swathes of
did
darkness
that,
all throughout the
I
background.
guess they come
Some of them
alive.
naturally take shape as he goes. A swarm of
Oh,
ravens delivering portents of doom, black cats weaving between the stick figure's legs. Some of the shapes are just black blobs with glowering red eyes.
This is
Others
not
are
gonna
phantom-like
end up
wisps.
good.
In the very back, looming over all of it, the animator sketches out a hulking reptilian figure, jaws
Oh
open wide to expose its
my
sharp, eager
goodness.
teeth. As he sits back and takes a look at his handiwork, the animator feels a pang of guilt over depriving the little stick man of self-expression. As one more touch, he adds a speech bubble next to the stick figure's head and scrawls the words, "Get me out of here." Just then, the doorbell rings. Oh, pizza's here. As his mind turns from artistic pursuits to the hungry growl in his stomach, he abandons the stick figure and all of his shadowy tormentors. He can always come back to it later. For now, he feels a sense of relief. The dark clouds have cleared from his mind, transferred onto the page. Next time he sits down, he'll be able to come up with something great. He just knows it.
Did he
But for
stick
now,
pit?
pizza and a bit of trashy
The
reality
figure
television.
disappeared. I
After
didn't
demolishing
see
half
it.
of the pizza and a few episodes of some new wilderness survival competition show he's already forgotten the name of, the animator changes into his pajamas, brushes his teeth, and collapses back into bed. Everything will
The
feel better
stick
in the morning.
figure
It always
disappeared.
does. Or at least, it does most of the time.
Oh, it's
After a
back
moment,
there again.
he sinks
But
into
before
a deep,
it was not
dreamless
there
sleep.
when
But rather than waking up to the chiming of his alarm clock, the animator wakes after only a few hours to the unmistakable feeling of being watched. He forces his heavy eyelids open, scanning the room as his heart races with the dread he can't put into words. There's no one in here. Nothing unusual except... Is that his stick figure drawing? It's leaning against the wall now. He left it flat on the table, right? As he squints at it in the darkness, he notices something strange. He can see the stick figure, but not the shadowy figures around it. The speech bubble is gone too. Wait, there's no paper? It's just his stick figure, standing against the wall, as if it had been peeled off of the page and stuck there. Worrying it could be some kind of sleep paralysis, the man wiggles his toes and clenches his fists. He can move just fine. He's definitely awake. So what's happening here?
My goodness.
He's about to give up and try to go back to sleep when the stick figure takes a step toward him. Then another. As the animator watches in wide-eyed disbelief, the stick figure walks across the desk, coming to a stop at the very edge.
Shoot.
The man flicks his lamp on, blinking as his eyes adjust to the sudden light. There's no denying it. The stick figure is standing there, staring at him with its wide, hand-drawn eyes.
Oh my goodness.
Suddenly, words appear next to the figure, identical in handwriting and color to the words he wrote in the speech bubble. Hello, where am I? The man blinks for a moment, trying to process it. After a moment, he answers, you're in my room. Why? Honestly, I don't really know. He shakes his head, rubbing at his eyes.
Yeah.
When he opens them, there's new text waiting for him. Where did I come from? Do you know? Is
Yes,
this really
he
happening?
does.
This all feels completely insane. But those eyes are staring at him expectantly, and he feels like he needs to answer. I drew you on that paper back there. You created me? Are you God?
Yes. No.
The animator bursts out laughing at this. It's all just too absurd, too insane. I'm definitely not God. I don't know what I am. Listen, I'm exhausted. I'm gonna try to get some sleep. Oh, okay. Please don't let me stop you. I'll be here, I think. I don't really know how this all works.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah. Good night. The animator switches off the lamp, rolls over, and after a bit of a struggle, manages to fall asleep again. Maybe this was all some really lucid dream, and when he wakes up in the morning, the stick figure will be back on the page where it belongs. The screech of the alarm jolts him from his slumber, and he reaches out to hit the snooze button. As he opens his eyes, he takes in the sight of the room, bathed in the fresh light of day. The previous night was bizarre, but it's all over now. Everything is back to normal.
That's what you think.
Wait. No. The stick figure is gone from the desk, but it isn't on the page either. In fact, the entire piece of paper, which once held yesterday's drawings, is blank. If it isn't here, then where the hell is it? He rushes downstairs, scanning the entire house for the sight of the stick figure. He spots it, standing on the kitchen counter, looking intently at the magnets on the refrigerator. When it sees him, it begins to speak again. Well, to manifest words next to its head. Oh, there you are. I'm so glad you're back. I have so many questions. What am I? Why am I here? Oh, and all these horrible voices. They keep saying the most terrifying things to me. The stick figure never gets an answer, as the shock of the encounter makes the animator's knees collapse. He slumps to the floor, completely overwhelmed. When he comes back to his senses, he makes a call to a local psychiatrist. Whatever's gone wrong with his brain, he's intent on fixing it. What this poor, troubled animator doesn't realize is that he is perfectly sane. He's just sharing his home with SCP-3052.
Yeah.
SCP-3052 is a designation given to two separate entities, SCP-3052-1 and SCP-3052-2. SCP-3052-1 is a humanoid entity that best resembles a hand-drawn, and somewhat poorly drawn at that, copper-colored stick figure. There are two circular holes drawn in the entity's head, which appear to function as its eyes.
Yeah.
Though SCP-3052-1 is believed to be two-dimensional, anyone facing the entity seems to perceive it as facing them directly, regardless of the angle or direction it is viewed from. Due to this effect, the exact dimensions of the entity have not yet been determined. The entity has been X-rayed, allowing for a better understanding of its physiology, and it has been found to lack both a skeletal structure and any organs. After this revelation, some samples were taken from SCP-3052-1's body and analyzed. These samples were found to consist of a mixture of spray paint, acrylic paint, and, strangely enough, human blood. Though SCP-3052-1 has no visible hands, its arms ending in flat pencil strokes like most stick figures do, it has proven itself capable of picking up, holding, and moving objects as if it did have hands. The figure has not shown or expressed a need for food or water. Even if it did, it is uncertain where that food or water would go, as the figure has no mouth that can be seen. As the lack of mouth might imply, the entity is not capable of speech or any other vocalizations. However, it is able to effectively communicate via words that manifest visually near its head and linger there for approximately 7 to 10 seconds at a time. These words are made up of the same substances as SCP-3052-1's body, and like the entity's body, they will face a viewer directly, no matter what angle they are viewed from. SCP-3052-1 is sparing in its communication, but has displayed a large vocabulary and intelligence on par with an average human adult. During its communications, the entity expressed that it was struggling with mental illnesses, including depression, anxiety, and mild schizophrenia.
Poor creature.
An initial intake session with the on-site psychologist confirmed these self-diagnoses and kickstarted SCP-3052-1's weekly therapy sessions. The anomalous effects of SCP-3052-1 extend beyond the obvious. It is a living stick figure, yes, but there is more to the story than that. Whenever the entity is photographed or recorded on video, additional subjects can be seen in the resulting photo or video footage. These subjects, which cannot be seen in person with the naked eye, are designated SCP-3052-2. These instances are black entities with vivid red eyes, composed in a similar hand-drawn manner to SCP-3052-1. The entities are often shapeless, appearing like a blob or shadow with red eyes, but they do occasionally take on the shapes of various animals, such as crows, cats, and a large unidentified reptile. These instances communicate in the same manner as SCP-3052-1, though their letters are black as opposed to copper.
They're going
These
to
instances
kill
do not
you.
attempt to communicate with anyone other than SCP-3052-1, and the communications are not exactly friendly.
No.
SCP-3052-2 has a habit of harassing, threatening, and otherwise verbally abusing SCP-3052-1.
Poor
It tends
him.
to claim that the Foundation is planning to terminate SCP-3052-1, though there are, as
They
far
need
as
to
I can tell,
protect him.
no Foundation plans for its termination. SCP-3052-1 rarely responds aside from a nod, but will occasionally voice agreement with SCP-3052-2. The SCP Foundation first discovered SCP-3052-1 on June 19th of a redacted year, when it was living in the home of an anonymous digital animator. The animator, thought to be the creator of SCP-3052-1, was found in his bedroom, where he had perished due to complications from his antipsychotic medication. Oddly
He
enough,
overdosed
blood samples from the deceased
himself?
animator did not match the blood found in the samples of SCP-3052-1's body. The origin of that blood is still unknown, and no DNA matches have been found so far. Due to its regular cooperation and compliance with the Foundation and its research, SCP-3052-1 has been given the ability to request items and amenities to boost its morale. All of the requests have been officially logged in its file. First, the entity asked for a blank journal and a pen, which it was given. Since then, the entity journals every day and shares its entries with the psychologist during their sessions. Next, it requested a television, a DVD player, and a selection of various DVDs. Most of these were animated comedies, though a wide variety of other genres were also represented. Wanting to spruce up its containment chamber, the entity requested a potted houseplant next. The request was granted, but there was an oversight. The entity had no way to water the plant. The plant quickly expired, plunging SCP-3052-1 into a guilt-ridden depressive episode.
Why don't give him
As
a
therapeutic
fake
measure,
plant?
the entity was given a new houseplant and a watering can. This time, it was able to keep the plant alive, vastly improving its mood.
Oh, that's
so far,
good.
SCP-3052-1 has not requested anything else, but the ability to do so is still on the table. All of
Aww,
SCP-3052-1's
cutie.
conversations with its psychologist are taped, but most of the footage is kept private. Doctor-patient confidentiality still applies to living stick figures, as it turns out. There is one excerpt from a session that has been archived in the official file, however, which can offer a window into the entity's usual therapeutic
Oh my
process.
goodness.
The psychologist's identity has been redacted from the file, so for our purposes, I will simply refer to them as Dr. X.
Hey,
Dr. X began the session with a standard greeting. How are you today?
Yeah.
SCP-3052-1 shrugged. Kind of tired? Dr. X made a note of this, then continued. Have you been having trouble sleeping? SCP-3052-1 nodded. I keep having the dreams. Dr. X made another note.
Yep.
Yes, you've told me about them. Have you written them down as I advised? SCP-3052-1 shook its head. I keep forgetting. Sorry.
That's
Dr.
okay.
X's expression was sympathetic, their tone of voice calm. There's no need to apologize. It's completely optional. Still, it might help. Do you still hear the voices? All the time. Do they sound like anyone you know? Dr. X asked. Again, SCP-3052-1 shrugged. I don't know a lot of people. What sort of things do they say?
Poor,
There was a long pause,
poor
during
him.
which SCP-3052-1 did not respond. Dr. X filled the silence. If you don't feel comfortable discussing it, that's... SCP-3052-1 cut them off, saying, They say you're going to kill me. Who is going to kill you? I'm not sure. Whoever works here, I guess. Dr. X made several notes, then spoke again. Do you believe we're going to kill you? There was another long pause. Then the response appeared next to SCP-3052-1's head. I don't know. Do you feel like you're in danger staying here? Sometimes. I see.
Poor
Have you
him.
been experiencing any visual hallucinations? Like seeing things? Precisely. SCP-3052-1 shook its head. Not really, no. Nothing unusual or strange? I don't think so. I
You
see.
don't know?
Dr. X made one more note. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss? After a moment, SCP-3052-1 said, My watering can's almost empty. Dr. X nodded. I'll let someone know. Following this session, Dr. X concluded that SCP-3052-1 is likely unable to see instances of SCP-3052-2 and perceives them as disembodied voices. If you were concerned about the watering can and the well-being of the plant, the can was refilled after the session. A little while later, SCP-3052-1 was seen watering the plant, which is currently thriving.
Wow.
There is one more addendum to the official file for SCP-3052 that I found to be notable. It is a transcript of a video that captured a conversation between SCP-3052-1 and SCP-3052-2. SCP-3052-1 was sitting at its desk in its containment chamber, staring at the wall of its cell. After about 45 seconds of inactivity, an instance of SCP-3052-2, in the shape of an unidentified large reptile, skulked into frame from the left. It stopped about 15 centimeters away from SCP-3052-1, who did not turn to look at it. It did, however, acknowledge its presence when the reptile began to speak. Just as the stick figure had described in his therapy session, the reptile warned of impending doom. They're going to kill you, you know. The figure responded simply, I know. What are you going to do about it? I don't know. You might as well just let them. You'd be doing the world an enormous favor.
That's mean.
SCP-3052-1 shrugged. Yeah, probably. When SCP-3052-2 spoke again, the words appeared in rapid succession, as if the reptile was delivering an impassioned speech. It's your fault that you're in here. If you had just kept your mouth shut and not asked him any damn questions, this wouldn't be happening. Where am I? What are these voices? Are you God? There is no God, idiot. He's dead, remember? He's dead and you killed him. Just like that. All because you opened your stupid mouth. Now you're going to hell, and it's all your fault. After this, the entity sat in silence for about 20 seconds. After a moment, SCP-3052-2 broke the silence. I'm going away now. I can't stand looking at you. Then SCP-3052-2 slowly moved out of frame, leaving the stick figure alone with its thoughts. SCP-3052-1 is currently kept in a standard humanoid containment chamber. The entity's containment is monitored constantly via video surveillance, which is manned by staff with level 2 clearance or higher. SCP-3052-1 is granted 1 session per week with the on-site psychologist for the sake of maintaining its mental health. These sessions are also monitored via video surveillance by level 2 staff or higher. Should the entity make any official requests, these must be directed to and approved by a staff member of level 4 or higher. Speaking of requests, there have been proposals by members of the research team requesting experiments that would involve showing SCP-3052-1 recordings of SCP-3052-2 instances. These requests are currently pending approval. When SCP-3052-1 was caught on video being tormented by SCP-3052-2, the reptile spoke to the stick figure of God. I may be out of line here, this is just a hypothesis, but I believe it was possibly referring to that deceased animator, the one found in the same house where SCP-3052-1 was first discovered. If he did, in fact, create SCP-3052-1, and by extension, SCP-3052-2,
he did.
Then it would only make sense for his creations to view him as their god. Perhaps the appearance of SCP-3052-1 took a toll on the man's sanity, driving him to the edge until it cost him his life. Perhaps SCP-3052-2 is not a separate entity at all, but rather the manifestation of SCP-3052-1's guilty conscience. If that is the case, then it is entirely possible that continued therapy sessions will eradicate SCP-3052-2 altogether. Of course, I could be wrong. It's happened before. But the idea that SCP-3052-1 could eventually find some peace, a sense of safety, and freedom from the guilt that follows it like a shadow, is an enticingly comforting one. After all, if even a two-dimensional living stick figure can heal from its trauma, cast off the yoke of shame and fear around its neck, and live a happier life, maybe there's hope for us all with our three-dimensional troubles.
Because he made of him,
but isn't it a nice thought,
the
just the same?
stick person.
Check out the Dr. Bob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of Dr. Bob, like SCP-1966, Sentient Body Scanner.
Yeah, when he made the picture, he made the stick person to be one, and he made the other ones, shadow figure, be the ones that, were frustrated and mean towards him. So he made, what was happening in his life. That'll be it for Awesome Fans. Don't forget hit that like button and comment down below and subscribe. See you, Awesome Fans. Bye.